It is Tuesday night in East Lansing, Michigan. My name is Jim Comparoni, publisher, SpartanMag.com. Come on in, gather around, behave yourselves. Join Spartan Mag live with some questions over in the chat area, or some of you have already posted questions over the Underground Bunker message board at SpartanMag.com. We will get to those questions like we do, getting to it on a weekly basis. We might start doing it more often. I've been talking about that for a couple of years, but I think we might be doing it a little bit more. Maybe some briefs, maybe a brief, like a 3-question thing, afternoon type of thing. Keep your eye out for that. Why would we do it now? Because training camp's about ready to start, ladies and gentlemen. East Lansing, Michigan. If I didn't say it already a minute ago, my name is Jim Comparoni, publisher of SpartanMag.com. SpartanMag.com is the source for Michigan State sports among premium subscribers on the internet, covering Michigan State football, basketball, and recruiting. Been doing it since the 1990s, since way back before the internet, or at least in the early days of the internet. SpartanMag.com was around back in 1997 when the World Wide Web was just getting started. You remember when they used to call it the World Wide Web? Anyway, SpartanMag.com is the Rivals.com site covering Michigan State sports. And this Thursday, 9 a.m. sharp, over at the Scandalaris Center, the practice fields, August camp will begin. And I will be there. Paul Konendijk, associate editor of SpartanMag.com. He will be there. Ricardo Cooney, senior writer for SpartanMag.com. I'm hoping to see him. I texted him today. I think that he'll be over there. I've not seen him since the shutdown. We've been in contact, but looking forward to seeing him. I might even hug him. And I'd hug a lot of you people if you were there too. But practice is about ready to kick off. We'll be there for about 15 or 20 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, depending on how long Mel Tucker allows us to stay. He does a lot of things in a very Nick Saban sort of way, which is in terms of practice access, similar to Mark D'Antonio. I assume that's what's going to happen this week. Last year, there was no access to practice for obvious reasons. It'll be the first time that those of us in the media will be able to go to practice since August of 2019. First time in 24 months. Because in 2019, as usual, they let us watch practice during August camp. And then once the season starts, media not really allowed to watch practice. Just in August, 2 or 3 times a week. For short stints, the pads won't be on yet, but we'll get a chance to take a look at the new Spartans. A lot of new faces out there. Dane Robeson will be there, the terrific freelance photographer who does work for SpartanMag.com. Look forward to seeing him also. I'm pretty sure he'll be there. I talked to him today, did a little phone tag, hoping he'll be there. It's going to be fun. So then we also heard that other news, Monday, August 23rd, the 18th annual Meet the Spartans will be taking place, I think, at Spartan Stadium. Definitely at Spartan Stadium, right? 6 p.m. to 7:30. Gates open at 5 p.m. Concession stands will be open. Cheerleaders going to be there. Sparty's going to be there. I don't know about the band. I did not hear anything about the band in the press release. No photos or autographs this year, for obvious reasons. But the difference this year is that Michigan State fans will be able to watch a practice. That's new. That'll be good. I'm sure there won't be many. They're not going to be practicing their trick plays or anything like that, but they need to get work done. You have to get work done every single time you take the field. Maybe they'll just go through I don't know. Maybe if that's 6 p.m., would they practice earlier in the day and just do some special teams at 6 o'clock? I'm not sure. Well, 2-a-days, they're not allowed to do 2-a-days anymore. I'm not sure, but I'm excited about that. Practice, open to the public, August 23rd. For Meet the Spartans. Over at SpartanMag.com, right now, some good stories popping over there. Noah Sprunger with a really good article today. Noah Sprunger, intern extraordinaire for SpartanMag.com. He had an article on what's next for the Michigan State offensive line recruiting picture. Now that Ryan Baer has eliminated Michigan State, which is a little bit of a surprise to me. Ryan Baer, nice 4-star offensive lineman from Northeast Ohio. Kentucky's in there. Notre Dame's in there a little bit. I'm not sure who else. Kind of took my eye off that a little bit when Michigan State was eliminated. Michigan State was running strong there for a while, but didn't finish. But Michigan State's got 4 pretty good offensive line commitments right now. And as I've said in the past, Michigan State recruiting a different grade of offensive linemen right now, a better grade of prospect at that position. And we will see if that yields better offensive linemen in the future. I think there's a good chance that position group has a bright future, especially with the 4 that they've gotten committed right now for the 2022 class. Also at SpartanMag.com, Jason Killip, SpartanMag.com contributor for a number of years now with a very good recap of what went on this past weekend at Spartan Dog Con, the first time. Spartan Dog Con 1, if you will. Mel Tucker, a lot of his forward-thinking creativity, putting that together with his array of analysts and aides and people that help the program, and the on-campus recruiting staff. It's a 2-day event, combination of a reunion for former players, in excess of 120 former Spartans at Mel Tucker's house. I think that was Friday night when that happened. They were not expecting that many. They got maybe even 130 or 140 or more. I heard it was outstanding. I heard the former players loved it. And I heard they loved the new staff and they loved Mel Tucker. And the next day, recruits were on campus July 31st for an event which included a scavenger hunt around campus. And those recruits were able to interact a little bit with former players on campus during the event. And there was a question and answer. What's this? A question and answer. They had a question and answer session with former players, and there were presentations dealing largely, not limited to, but also largely with life after football. There was a panel for Q&A, and also in terms of presentations, some recent former players like Todd, T.J. Duckett, and Keith Nickel talked about the things they did and they're doing after football, and others. Who's the other one? There were a few others. I was not there, but heard about it. I heard it was great, and the former players are really impressed with what's going on over there. They're fired up. They're all in. They're all behind it. And I'm sure the recruits gathered some of that also. The recruits, a lot of them were 2023s, 2024s. Some of the players that were there, there's a tight end from Dexter, Michigan, a 2023. He's going to be a junior this fall. Brennan Parachek, he was there. Jeremiah Beasley is going to be a sophomore from Belleville. He was there. Jalen Thompson, defensive lineman for Detroit Cass Tech 2024. He was there, renewing acquaintances with his old high school coach, Thomas Wilcher, who's now an assistant at Michigan State, an off-field assistant. Let's see, Ryan Coretta, offensive lineman. He's a junior from Columbus, St. Charles. He was there. Also from West Bloomfield, a corner, Jameer Benjamin, big-timer, 2024. And also 2025, big-time defensive lineman from Detroit Catholic Central. Caden Strayhorn was there, the son of former Spartan All-Big Ten center and current color analyst for the Spartan Radio Network, Jason Strayhorn. His youngster, Caden Strayhorn, saw him at camp this summer. The real deal as a prospect. He was there. And some others, some recent commitments over there. You know, Gavin Brocious, Alex Van Sumeren, Terrell Henry, and some others. Alex Van Sumeren is the latest. Committed to Michigan State over the weekend. You know, Van Sumeren, 4-star defensive tackle, Essexville Garber. Really gives a nice boost to the Michigan State recruiting class. He's, 6'1", 300. Explosive. Committed to Michigan originally, and decommitted. And Michigan State, strong recruiting pitch for him. We have a couple of stories about that commitment from the weekend over at SpartanMag.com. You can check those out as well. Anyway, I'm going to put that up there if anyone wants to get involved out there. We will take some phone calls. We're going to open mic night. The way this works is over at SpartanMag.com, I invite Michigan State fans, the subscribers of SpartanMag.com, to post questions on the Underground Bunker message board. The Underground Bunker message board is the church of what's happening now. The church of what's happening now with Michigan State sports. It's the daily narrative on Michigan State sports. Anything that's going on related to Michigan State sports, talking about it amongst Michigan State fans and friends and some frenemies. Not going to lie to you. Over at SpartanMag.com, the Underground Bunker message board, I invited Michigan State fans over there to post some questions earlier today. We will be going over some of those questions. I reviewed the first 6 or 7 of them. Didn't have time to get to the rest of them. I might read those semi-blind, not knowing what those questions, what direction they're pointing in. And we will take those. All right, we'll get right to it right now. Question number 1 comes from Ty Garland. We'll get to that one in a minute.
Call from
Cali Spartan.
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail, press.
All right, let's go out to Detroit, Michigan. We will hold that question from Ty Garland for a moment. First, we'll go to the phone lines. Talk to our friend Callie Spartan out in Detroit. How's it going, Callie Spartan? You doing all right?
Still good, comp. Just in the middle of moving.
Moving for Detroit?
No, I'm still in Detroit. Just different. We're just getting a bigger house. Family's starting to grow a little bit.
Sounds great. Glad to hear that.
But yeah, man, it's been a long time, comp. But I've been selfishly, I've been doing a little politicking on the board about my theory that Malik Hall has grown. Is there any movement on that?
Has grown, like gotten taller?
Yeah, man. I've been watching. I know it seems strange, but if you watch those workout videos for the basketball team, he definitely looks taller than Marble. And when he stands next to Maddie, they look like they're the same height. So he has to be at least 6'8", 6'8.5".
6'8".
So I mean, huh?
He grew prior to last year. You may remember that. Do you remember that? He grew prior to last season. So I can't confirm that. I could ask some people in the know. I could reach out to some coaches and see if that's the case. I wouldn't doubt it because as of last year he was still growing, and that happens once in a while. And
I mean,
that would be exciting for him because he's not he's not a really, really thin guy, so he can handle getting a little bit taller. It won't weaken him in any way. That's interesting. Yeah, I've seen some of those videos, and I saw your post at the Final Forum message board at SpartanMag.com talking about that and asking if he's taller. I remember Raymar Morgan came in, like 6'7" or so, and he ended up 6'8.5", and he was taller than Marquise Gray. I remember one time at practice, somebody said, "Hey man, Raymar's taller than Queese now." And Queese's like, "No, he's not." And they stood back to back, and sure enough, Raymar Morgan was taller, and Queese was not happy about that. But that happens. Sometimes guys get taller, and I cannot confirm that's the case with Hall, but at this time last year, I know he was still growing. So you have a good eye out for that, and that's interesting. There's going to be a battle for minutes at those positions. He and Hauser at the 4, those two could and should combine for a nice stretch 4, power forward position for Michigan State. Those two players are a little bit different, but Michigan State should be pretty good at that position. What do you think about him getting taller? What are your thoughts about that?
So my thing about that is, because there's been a lot of, as you like to say, scuttlebutt about, him potentially doing some minutes at the 3. If he's gotten bigger and maintained his lateral mobility, that opens us up for a lot of options. Let's just say this. Let's just say for whatever reason he grew to 6'9", right? And he's still that mobile. There's a possibility you could have him as a small ball 5 in certain lineups to be like a super quick defensive team. And with the shooters we presumably have, and the more skilled players we just got, provided everything works out. I mean, to have that type of defense of an upperclassman that knows what he's doing and who's like a grinder type guy like Malik is, dude, that's a late game defensive 5 lineup with possibly Gabe at the 3. You could still play you could play. You could play Marble at the 4 to then, and that means there's more. I'm not saying Marble's a 3-point shooter, but he has an outside shot. He's a perimeter shot. It spaces the floor a little bit more than say having Maddie out there, and it gives you a stronger guy than a Bingham. Not to say Bingham hasn't gotten stronger, but he's no Malik. So it's just depending what type of scenario you're in, late game, and you want to really make sure someone doesn't bang into the paint, but you still want to have some scoring out there. To have Malik at the 5 at 6'9" that's an asset if that's how tall he is right now. To play for him to be able to essentially play 3 through 5 changes our defense dramatically to me if that's what happens.
Well, we don't know for sure that he is 6'9", but 6'8", he's a tall. He's not short as a stretch 4. And just because he grows a little bit may not mean he can play 5, down on the block against Coburn and the guy at Michigan and those types, But against teams that go smaller, he could be a 5. Can he share the floor with Hauser because he's taller now all of a sudden? And I think you're going to see these guys show up with better physical builds now as well because they will have had an entire spring and summer in the strength program as opposed to being away from the program for 4, 5, 6 months last year at this time. So Hall, he's got to make sure he's hitting that face-up jumper, which has come and gone for him throughout his career. And if Malik Hall can do that, he's got some talent in terms of putting it on the floor a little bit more that they can maybe start exploring from that point also. But yeah, that's exciting, and I'm intrigued to see what kind of improvement we can observe from those players. Not only the freshmen coming in, but some of those return players that did not have an entire offseason last year. Marble, and you mentioned Sissoko and Bingham. Bingham's gotten thicker. I mean, he's not going to be a Jim Rowinski by any means, but that's another guy that would have benefited from being on campus for a regular offseason last year. He kind of flatlined a little bit last year and had a season that was similar to the ones he's had in the past. But coaches believe he's ready to be a starter, impact, consistent scorer in a number of ways type of guy, Marcus Bingham, this year. So I think you might see a rising tide raise all ships in terms of the veteran big men they have coming back. We talked about this last year. Michigan State had 6 scholarship big men. That's the first time Izzo's ever had 6 scholarship big men, and it was too many. It was a logjam. And I think that slowed the development of all 6 of them because none of them really took the bull by the horns and owned the position to get 30 minutes a night. It was they were trading off. Sometimes it was Kithier, sometimes it was Hall, then Hauser. You know what happened? Bingham and Sissoko a little bit here and there. 6. It was too much to juggle all 6 of those. Now that Kithier's gone, you're down to 5. They're all a year older. They've all had a good offseason, or they're in the midst of a good offseason. 5 big men is a lot still, so it's good competition there. But I'm intrigued to see what those guys look like on the front line. I think it could look pretty good.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think when I know it's it's just more access and the fact that we can see more of these videos come out. But I think just like how on the football team we hear a lot of the strength and conditioning, we see some results when they post their pictures and their stats and everything. I like the fact that these guys look like they're really getting after in the weight room for football and basketball. I don't know, like we said, we haven't seen them play any games yet for either sport. But the fact that if you're in shape and you're just sometimes if you can't outskill a guy, if you can grind them out, we got a lot of guys who look like they care, who are putting in the work, who are I feel like we're going to be in every game for football and basketball this year. I don't care who we play. Obviously injuries coming to it, but dude, there's an energy in the program right now. People are talking about it in Detroit. You hear it nationally. People aren't saying Michigan State is just boo-hoo anymore. They're we got it's less boo-hoo, more we got to see what this workouts have done. Because people are talking about Michigan State as being up and coming again. It's no longer a joke. You know what I mean? And it's good to see that. Can you kind of feel obviously injuries coming to it, drinking the Kool-Aid.
I hear you. I think there's reason. I'm not sure there's reason for championship optimism, but there's reason to believe you're going to see competitiveness from both teams. Maybe not when Michigan State plays Ohio State in football. I mean, when Ohio State wants to turn the power on, they can blow out anybody in the Big Ten. Sometimes they get caught snoozing a little bit, and some teams extend them into the fourth quarter and give them a scare. Maybe Michigan State can do that this year. I mean, matchups-wise, I wouldn't anticipate that. But everything else, Michigan State should be competitive in football, I think, every other game. Now, there'll be a game like last year against Iowa when a team blows them out that might take us by surprise as viewers. But going into it, yeah, I mean, Michigan State's ranked number 74 in the country by – I think Athlons, and I don't really – I can see why people would have them that low. I understand why the media picked Michigan State dead last in the Big Ten East. I can understand that because there are so many unknowns, but those of us that watch the program closely know that there are all these new faces, and it's not wise to bet on new faces in college football, but the new faces are better. There's an improvement in athleticism. They've improved the roster. Everybody believes that. We've not seen it. I'll take their word for it, based on who left and some of the people that have come in. Whether that can all gel together and be a good football team remains to be seen. But I think there's reason to watch with interest, and maybe cautious optimism. Definitely optimism that progress is being made. Question is how much of that rubber is going to meet the road this year in terms of victories. Not sure, but I think it's going to be entertaining. It's going to be intriguing, and there's reason for some cautious optimism. Basketball too. I mean, that's a long way away, but with Tyson Walker coming in as the new point guard, it's going to be fun to watch him. I think that's going to make other players better. I think Gabe Brown is going to be still somewhat inconsistent, but more consistent than he's been. He's going to be more of a primary go-to guy. More plays and sets will be featuring him, coming off down screens, curls, catch and shoot, working on, putting it on the deck toward the rim. Of course, shooting in transition, scoring in transition for him. And I think he'll be productive that way because he's going to be getting a lot of shots that Aaron Henry used to get. And last year, Aaron Henry got a lot of the shots that other players used to get. Now it's Gabe Brown's turn. I think he's going to be pretty good. I think Christie's going to be pretty good. There will be some inconsistency because they're going to be relying on a new point guard who is capable and some freshmen, but the veteran nature of the guys along the front line is going to be good. They're going to play. Everybody's going to screen. They're going to play defense. It's going to be Izzo brass tacks. They're going to be in games. And I'm expecting. I know the Big Ten's going to be strong, but I'm expecting one of those seasons in which Michigan State ends up being like a number 5 seed in the NCAA tournament and dangerous by the time March comes around. We've seen that movie before.
It's a great movie, Comp. Well, I'll let you go, man. Glad to you guys you're doing shows again every week.
Appreciate that. Appreciate you. I'm going to go ahead. I appreciate that, Callie Spartan. Thanks for calling in. And anyone else wants to get involved, you can go ahead and do that as well. We'll talk football here in a moment. I'm going to send out a tweet. Watch your language. Let people know this is going on. I had this ready to go before, and then I went and crashed it down. We are live via SpartanMag. Find us here. Thank you for waiting. That's the name of that tune. All right, let's go back to the Ty Garland question. Ty Garland, a lot of you remember, is a current Spartan dog, a real-life Spartan dog, linebacker from New Jersey. Was a member of that famed 1993 recruiting class.
All right. To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2.
I didn't hear that, but we're going to gamble and try it.
To accept, press 1.
I didn't get your name, but this is Jim Comparoni. Welcome to SpartanMag Live.
Hey, it's Noah again from last week.
Yeah, what's going on?
Not much.
Appreciate you calling back in. I didn't hear you. I didn't hear you the first time. But what is your name again?
Noah.
Noah.
Yep.
All right.
Noah Kim. Yep.
Where are you calling from? You can just give me the town.
Pennsylvania.
From Pennsylvania. Great. How'd you become a Spartan fan?
Watching Dan Termio, the Bulla Brothers.
With your little brothers?
The Bulla Brothers. Max, Byron.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you became a Michigan State fan out there in Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Good for you. Good for you. I know in Pennsylvania they appreciate hard-hitting, blocking and tackling, old school football, if I'm not mistaken. Are you in that category?
Yep.
Good for you. Tell you what, when I grew up, when I was younger, back in the 80s, 70s, I liked Penn State, but I liked the Pitt Panthers a lot too. The Dan Marino era, Pitt Panthers, Hugh Green and those guys. And when Pitt and Penn State played each other, they were bitter rivals, but I liked both teams. So I always had trouble figuring out who I was rooting for in that game. Usually Pittsburgh, though. But Noah, what's on your mind? What's going on with you today? What do you want to talk about with Michigan State sports?
Will you be at fall camp tomorrow?
Thursday, when it begins, they will allow media to watch the first 15 minutes. Sometimes that stretches to 20 or 25. We'll see how it goes. But hoping we'll get to watch a little bit more than just stretching. Hopefully we'll be able to watch some footballs being thrown around a little bit and maybe some of the initial drills with the linemen, defensive backs as things, the initial installment of a lot of those things. It's always an exciting time, usually pretty hot weather, and it's like a Happy New Year type of thing, even though it's August. But yes, I'll be there, and I'm looking forward to it. First time in 24 months to go to a Michigan State football practice.
Will you do interviews with players and upload them on the YouTube?
Yeah, I should have mentioned that. Yeah, Mel Tucker is going to meet with media after practice, which I prefer to the way they've done it in the past with D'Antonio talking before practice. I'd rather talk to him after practice so he can talk about what he saw that day, who caught his eye, and how it went. I don't. If he talks before practice, that doesn't do us much any good. Those of us that are in the media and for fans to just get an idea of what's going on. So the good news is we will speak with him after practice, which is going to be around 11 a.m. And there will be players made available to us as well. We will not be able to pick which players we want to talk to. They will be selected players, selected internally by the program. They will be out speaking with us. I imagine Russo might come out, maybe Thorne. I'm guessing Drew Beasley, some of the leaders. Matt Allen maybe. Yeah. I would imagine Xavier Henderson. So there'll be a smattering of some of those type of guys. So we will be doing those interviews. We'll be writing stories at SpartanMag.com, and we'll be also recording video interviews that we will put on the YouTube site.
Then there's also the Big Ten bus tour too, kicking up here soon.
The Big Ten Network bus tour? Have they been
Yep.
have they been talking about that? They are doing that?
I believe they are. They mentioned it at media days.
Okay, that's exciting with DiNardo and those guys coming around. I'll be looking forward to that as well. They do a good job when they go around and talk to the coaches and give their insight or their observations about what each team, what strikes them about each team. And they're going to be optimistic about every team. They're not going to be tearing anyone down. That doesn't do the conference any good. So in some regards, it's all going to be pretty optimistic. A lot of Kool-Aid there. However, I will be interested to see what they think of Mel Tucker the first time they are able to attend one of his practices. They covered some of his games last year. I'll be interested to see what the former coach DiNardo and those guys think about Michigan State's practice when they come to town, whenever that is.
They also have Ohio State's Joshua Perry, too. He joined the crew as well.
I didn't know that. Excellent linebacker. He'll be a good addition. Hey, who you want to see for Michigan State football players this year? Who's caught your eye that you think might be able to make some noise this year that you think you've got a good feeling about?
Thorne, Russo, Walker, Collins, Hunt, Fitzpatrick, Lee Carlson, offensively. Horse and Matt Allen.
That's a big list. A lot of optimism there. Noah, I appreciate your call. Thanks for calling in.
Yep.
Thanks for supporting SpartanMag.com. We'll talk to you next time. Be good out there in Pennsylvania. There he goes. Thanks a lot, Noah. Let's get back to the question. Ty Garland, former Michigan State linebacker. His question was out here. Was over there on the Underground Bunker message board. He says, "Hey, Comp, greetings from Hawaii this morning." So Ty Garland's out in Hawaii. Good for him. He says, "Anything on how Ma'anate Ote and his progress has been going?" And he also asks, will Cal Halliday get significant snaps this year? Always rooting for the undersized linebacker. Ty Garland was an undersized linebacker. Bigger than me, but undersized coming out of New Jersey. Solid player. He was part of the 93 recruiting class. That was a Perlis class. Got on the field in the Saban years, mid-90s. Lives in Chicago now, I think. Sorry, Ty, I don't mean to give you your life story there. But anyway, got a feeling we might see Ty Garland on campus at Spartan Dog Con 2 next year, or one of these years coming up. Ma'anate Ote is the 4-star incoming freshman linebacker from California. Played last year in Las Vegas, Bishop Gorman High School, correct? Right? I tell you what, I've mentioned about this before. I thought his junior film, he didn't look all that fast sideline to sideline. Reminded me a little bit of, who was the kid from Cincinnati Moeller a few years ago? Shane, what's his name? Should know that. Anyway, he was a 4-star that I was like, man, I'm not sure about his speed either. And he was kind of okay in college, but never the breakthrough guy that maybe his ranking would have foretold. Nate Ote reminded me of that a little bit more physical, though. And, but his senior film looked a little quicker, and I've not heard anything about how he's doing, positively, negatively, or neutral. But just seeing some still photos, his build looks pretty good to me. He doesn't look like he's got any bad weight on him to me. He's got some big legs, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's a little quicker than he was in his junior film. Interesting one. 4-star came here to compete for a job right away. Who knows? The door is open. He's going to have a shot. So those pump the brake opinions on Nate Ote are just something that I saw as a junior. I'm not here. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that every single commitment is great. There's some people out there covering various teams that are like, every time there's a new recruit, this guy's gonna be great. He's an improvement over what they've got, because the unknown's undefeated. I try to keep it a little bit more real than that. I hope to be accurate. Don't want to be. We don't need a bunch of hyperbole in that category, in my opinion. So we try to keep it real. I'll tell you when I think I think someone's an exciting addition. Nateote was a nice ranking. He is physical, so we'll see. Starting on Thursday, as Ty Garland says, he's asking about Cal Halliday and whether I think he'll get significant snaps this year. I think you're at least going to see Cal Halliday on special teams. Halliday had a loud day in the spring scrimmage at the linebacker position. Smallish linebacker from Pennsylvania. And that's a guy that was a little bit of a tank as a linebacker in his high school film. He was a contact guy. D'Antonio liked him, brought him in. He doesn't really meet Mel Tucker's size specifications, but he's enough of a contact player that he is still in the program.
Andrew.
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2.
All right, Andrew, we're going to go ahead and bring you on to SpartanMag Live. Andrew, welcome to SpartanMag Live. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
What's new, man? Got any questions about Michigan State sports?
Yeah, I guess like a couple. So like, how do you think that the football team's going to be able to like just win? Because we haven't seen winning since 2017, and honestly, I'm getting kind of sick of like getting all hyped up and then just losing. So like, what do you think that Michigan State needs to do to like successfully win games this year?
Andrew, he's got some high standards. I appreciate that. How old are you, Andrew? If you don't mind me
I'm 13.
All right. Yeah. All right. Andrew wants some wins. He's tired of the hype in his young years. Tell you what, if you are my age or people that are watching that are older, they went through some lean years, and 2019 Michigan State went to the Pinstripe Bowl and won a bowl game.
Yeah.
Back in 1993, that would have been considered a good year, believe it or not. So I appreciate your youth and your youthful enthusiasm and your high standards. So you're asking, when are they going to start winning and not all this hype, right? Well, SpartanMag.com, we're not really hyping up this season. We're saying 6-6 would be a solid, productive year. 7-5 would be a step in the right direction. So I don't think you're hearing any hype about, contending for a division championship or making a run at 10 wins or anything like that. So I don't think there's that type of hype this year. So if that doesn't happen, don't be disappointed. You got to learn to be patient and play the long game and look to see what Mel Tucker's doing long term. I think he's recruiting pretty well right now, having only coached 7 games at Michigan State with a 2-5 record. If he ever gets to where he's winning 7 games a year, 8-4, gets over the hump and have a 10-2 type of program, I think his recruiting could really skyrocket. So as a young Michigan State supporter and observer, that's what you have to be inching toward. I know that sounds like a long time. You've only been around for 13 years. So for you, a 3-year plan, I mean, you're thinking about when you were 9 years old, and 10 years old seems like a long time ago, right? When you get to be my age, 3 years goes by. 3 years goes by like that when you get to be my age. So what I'm saying is probably not going to give you much comfort, but you're so young that November to you seems like a long time away, right? To me, November is going to be here. November's going to be here in about 5 minutes in my life. So, hey, Michigan State's going to win some, lose some. What you want to see this year is competitive football every week. You're going to want to see strong attention to detail, strong quality control. That means few penalties, blockers blocking the correct person, not having 2 offensive linemen incorrectly blocking one person, and a running play doesn't go anywhere because there's a miscommunication. You want to see same pageness in the defensive backfield where there are not coverage busts when they're maybe changing a coverage at the snap. Those things are the things that Michigan State needs to do well, and really any college football team needs to do well. Last year, Michigan State was so-so in those. The year before, D'Antonio's last year, Michigan State really struggled in the defensive backfield in those categories. And then that was the year, Harlan Barnett was not here, brought back Harlan Barnett 2 years ago, and this is his second year. That's going to improve, although there's a lot of new faces there. So you want to see some physicality, you want to see quality control, and you want to see competitiveness in every game. And that was the precursor to success in the D'Antonio years. Even in, in 06, 07, they were 6-6 a couple of those years. And even in 2012, before they got over the top of the Rose Bowl year in 2013, even though they were a 500 team, they were competitive, they were physical, they didn't beat themselves, the quality control was there, and all the tinder was there, and all they needed was that spark the following year and get a little bit older in some ways, a little more explosive in some ways, and everything came together, and they had a top 5 team in the country, figuratively, kind of overnight. But the first things first, physicality, discipline, quality control. So even if they go 6-6 this year, if you can be astute enough to try to tune into those things, that's what you look for this year. And don't worry about the hype. Just live your life and be a happy 13-year-old, and don't expect too much too soon. But you're probably like a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan now, aren't you? No?
No, I'm a Browns fan. I live in Toledo.
Good for you, Browns fan. Yeah, okay.
I've been through the hardships of the 0-17. It wasn't fun.
Wow. You've got the character, young man, to be a proper Michigan State football fan. You have that patience, that toughness, persevere, and you stay on the boat, stay on the ship, stay on the train, and when the ship comes in, you'll be able to enjoy it more than the Sunshine fans. So I got a lot of respect for that. Are you an Indians fan or a Tigers fan? Probably not a baseball fan.
I'm an Indians fan.
Okay.
Like I live in like a suburb of Toledo, and it's like right on the border. So like most of my friends are like Tigers fans, but I'm just an Indians fan.
Good for you. What, Sylvania down that way?
Yeah, I live in Perrysburg. It's about 20 minutes away from the border.
All right, Andrew. Really appreciate it. Do you have any predictions for this year? Or any other observations for Michigan State?
Well, I've been like preparing myself for like 5-7 because with like the new transfers, like there's just no way that they're gonna be on like the same page every game. And with like a new full-time starting quarterback guaranteed, probably a new running back, new left tackle, I think it's just gonna be too much for them to win above 6 games. So I just think that you just have to be ready for 5-7 in my opinion.
All right, and if they go 7-5, you'll be happy, right? You'll see progress there.
Yeah, I'd be happy if they went 7-5.
Wow, Andrew, 13 years old. Andrew's impressing me. Andrew, when you're 18 and you're at Michigan State, you look us up. I have a feeling you're the next SpartanMag.com intern one of these years. All right, so you're probably around a lot of U of M Wolverine fans down that way. Toledo's pretty blue down that way, is it not? How do you handle that?
I'd say it's more red than blue.
Okay. Because in previous years, that was kind of, that's kind of a border war area between Wolverine and Buckeye territory there in that Toledo strip. But you're reporting that it's more scarlet and gray these days, eh?
Yeah. Like at my like middle school, on like the game week thing for like Ohio State, Michigan, they have like a day about it, and it just seems kind of stupid to me because Ohio State wins every year, and it just seems kind of stupid.
I don't disagree, Andrew. But what's the ratio usually? About 70% scarlet and 30% blue for that week?
I'd say about 60% to 40%.
Okay, that's kind of what I expected. I think it might have been 60-40 the other way in previous decades. What do you wear on those days? Your Indian stuff or green, or what do you do on those days?
Well, typically, I think one year I came in like full decked out of Michigan State.
Wow.
But I just wear normal clothes now.
All right, you do you, Andrew. You're on the right track. Appreciate you calling. Anything else?
No, that's about it.
There he goes. All right, thanks a lot, Andrew. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Andrew calling in from Perrysburg, Ohio, down there in the Ohio-Michigan border in southeast Michigan, northeast Ohio. Well, northern Ohio. That was a breath of fresh air, was it not? Let's get back to the questions. So we talked about Nate Ote. Cal Halliday. Halliday, little dude, physical dude, fiery dude. yeah, I think that he's got, he'll be on special teams for sure. He'll be battling for playing time at the linebacker position. That's what you're asking about. As you know, there's only 2 linebacker positions now. It's a 4-2-5 with 5 defensive backs. So rather than 3 linebackers, you got 2. One of them, I think, is going to be Quavaris Crouch, the transfer from Tennessee. I think he's got a great chance to be a starting inside linebacker. He started for Tennessee last year. Noah Harvey started for Michigan State last year. I think he's earned some trust. I expect him to be better. Just be a year older and a year better at 6'4", 235. I've got a feeling those are going to be the 2. You have Ben Van Sumeren transferring in from Michigan. You got Chase Klein, who's added 10 pounds up to 245 at 6'4", 245. Maybe Chase Klein becomes an edge guy on third downs because he's got some pass rush ability. Tank Brown from Minnesota redshirted last year for the Gophers. He was a 4-star. I'm not sure what to expect from him. I've not seen him play. Be interested to see what he looks like on Thursday. So, Halliday's in there with those guys. 6'1", 225 from Ellingsburg, Pennsylvania. Fiery guy, impact guy, scrappy. Somewhat explosive for a little guy. A little bit of Zach Thomas in him, maybe. Type of guy that's just going to force his way onto the field one way or another. Played a little bit last year, but I think he retains freshman status for this season, so he's got a lot of football ahead of him. But for 2 positions, Michigan State has some new faces there and some candidates. No proven standouts, that's for sure. But they've got some capable guys in there. Question number 2, finally getting to question number 2, now that we're into hour number 2. And before we get into that, I'm not sure. Dan Weslowski. Dan Weslowski with the Super Chat, $9.99. Personal sponsorship to the program tonight. Appreciate that, Dan. I hit that DJ air horn earlier in the show, like right at the beginning. I think it was at the beginning when the microphone was not working. So it just occurs to me that I may not have given you proper credit and proper attaboys and pats on the back and thank yous for your personal sponsorship. But I don't think you posted a question. Usually, the way I usually try to do this is if you post a personal sponsorship, I will get to your question first. I know that Don out in DeWitt has given a lot of sponsorships, and he keeps asking for a question because I saw him around town about a couple months ago and didn't have time to expand on something. And Don's been beating around the bush asking me to talk about that here on the air. But, Don, I'm going to have to call you or something because I can't talk about it on the air. It's something I got to keep under my hat. It's not like news or anything. Just something I observed. Something to keep under your hat for maybe 5 or 10 years. See how things pan out. It took place up at Fair State. It was interesting. I think I'll tell you about it. I can't tell you exactly what it is. Just Mel Tucker being cool. There's Don. It's just some cool things about Mel Tucker. That I won't be able to talk about for a while. But anyway, there's Don. There's Don straight with a personal sponsorship. Don, I guess I owe you one. I'm gonna have to call you and tell you. And now everybody's like, well, what's he talking about? What could he possibly be talking about? It's. Remember, things happen. During the donor circuit, sometimes the recruiting circuit, but in the off season, when coaches go and speak various places, and this wasn't necessarily a speaking engagement deal, but remember decades ago when Steve Spurrier ruffled some feathers by talking about Florida State being Free Shoes University. He said that at a donor event, and there was nothing like that, but sometimes coaches interact with one another a little bit, and I don't know. Tucker he's a boss, man. He was cool. Everybody would approve. Can't go into details right now, but it was good. And it won't be the last time he does something that you guys would like. And just as an observer here, that's all I'm being. I'm not being a pom-pom waver over here. Just some observations. Question number 2, Go Green 88 from Central Lake via Valparaiso, Indiana says, what are your 2 or 3 keys for a chance to be 6-6 this year or better, if not by record? 2 or 3 keys for what you would consider a successful season. Top of the list, quarterback play, whether it's Russo or Thorne or a combination of both. It's got to be good. It can't be shaky. It can't be inconsistent. It needs to be good, consistently good, like what Northwestern got last year from Peyton Ramsey. That's what Michigan State needs this year from Thorne and or Russo. Got to have that. Number 2, quality offensive line play, leading to the ability to run the ball. Ability to run the ball, get into 2nd and 6, 2nd and manageable, set up play action, opens up the playbook, punch it into the red zone, get short yardage. That means quality offensive line play for the first time in a few years. That's number 2. Number 3, same pageness on the secondary. I mentioned that a moment ago when I was speaking with caller Andrew. Reduce the busts in the secondary. Didn't have a lot of busts last year in the secondary. I don't think. The year before it was pretty terrible. Barnett came in last year, improved some things here and there. Now there's a lot of new faces. Barnett's good. He's proven we know that as a coach, right? You got Xavier Henderson, a good leader out there at safety. Angelo Gross moving over to safety. He gives them some versatility there. The other corners is it Kalen Gervin. You got Kimbrough coming in from Florida. Wilson coming in from Alabama. Some combination of those guys. We've not seen them play. We certainly have not seen them play together. They've not taken the field together in front of coaches until Thursday. They've been doing their 7-on-7s. That's a big question mark, that defensive backfield. The pass game, of course, is bigger than it's ever been in college football. You cannot be weak there. Michigan State has some ability. Can they get it all melded together in time to beat Northwestern in week number 1? Those are questions. And how their season goes this year, that first game is pivotal. I get nervous for a team, any team that has a huge pivotal game in week number 1. I think back in the past when Florida State and Miami played each other as rivals, first game of the year, they did that for, 3, 4, 5 years. And it was always an impressive game because they were both pretty well prepared and both teams had a lot of ability and they played hard. And I remember coming out of that game thinking, man, those teams are pretty darn good. And then both teams would kind of like nosedive after that. So much into game number 1, and one of those teams would lose, and it's hard to prevent your season from getting derailed with an opening week loss. Either Michigan State or Northwestern is going to take a really tough loss in week number 1, and Big Ten Network sets it up that way. They want to have inventory. They want to have big games early in the year to compete with the SEC, which puts big games on the air early in the year. So you get Michigan State and Northwestern right off the bat, and somebody's going to take a punch to the gut, and it's going to hurt their season. But the Big Ten will get their inventory. If I were Michigan State and Northwestern, I wouldn't want to do it that way. But I don't know. Have we seen, speaking of which, Michigan played Minnesota last year right off the bat. Well, it was the COVID year. Everybody played a Big Ten team right off the bat. Who does Michigan have to begin the season? They got Western Michigan. Yeah, see, for those like early season Friday night Labor Day games, they've not asked Michigan to do that yet. Michigan, I'm sure, doesn't want to. I'm sure Delaney used to listen to them. It'll be interesting to see if Warren continues to listen to them. Otherwise, it might be fun to see Michigan play a Friday night season opener at Northwestern one of these years. I'd have to wait and see it. With the new leadership there, maybe that'll happen. Question number 3, MX Spartan near the shore of Saginaw Bay, the lowest in the Great Lakes Power Rankings, he says. I'll pause right there. No. Saginaw Bay is part of Lake Huron. Lake Huron is still number 1 in the Great Lakes Power Rankings. My personal SpartanMag.com Great Lakes Power Rankings for the 3rd straight year, Lake Huron, number 1. Great Lakes Power Rankings. Lake Michigan making a push. Lake Michigan is the big daddy. It gets all the publicity. It's number 2 right now. I know Lake Superior is number 1 in its own way, in a lot of ways, but we'll just stop it right there for now. He says, do you have any crazy stories from the John L. Smith era? He says, I was younger at the time, so only watched games and didn't know any of the inside scoop. He says, Mel and Coach D seemed to run efficient programs. John L. seemed like a loose, goofy dude. Wondered if the culture was different. Yeah, loose is a good word. We talked about quality control earlier. Quality control was not good on defense back then. Number 1, Michigan State was running a spread offense. This is before everyone was running spread offenses. They weren't the first to do it. In the Big Ten, Northwestern was the first to do it. But even before that, Jim Wacker was running a version of the spread at Minnesota back in like 1995. But the first one to have success, and Tiller, I guess. Joe Tiller was the first spread. And Joe Tiller is strange because they were under center a lot, but it was spread. And they threw a lot, which was different in the mid-90s. But they never motioned wide receivers, which was always strange. Never put receivers in motion, but they were highly effective in a lot of ways in the 90s. And then Northwestern with the zone read spread out of shotgun, the first ones to do that. And Dave Baldwin was offensive coordinator for John L. Smith. Dave Baldwin was with Jack Elway and those guys at San Jose State with Craig Erickson. Was Erickson there? Those were some of the first guys that were doing the beginnings of the spread offense. Erickson was with John L. Smith at Idaho State, and they were Division I AA power. Erickson went on to Miami of Florida. But anyway, Dave Baldwin was a young coach. He was young, one of the forerunners of that spread evolution coming from the West Coast. Came to Michigan State, and they had some good things on offense. But I remember Henry Bulla, the late great Henry Bulla, talking about when he was with the Detroit Lions, and they ran, the Mouse Davis silver stretch run and shoot offense. And as defensive coordinator of the Lions, Henry Bulla used to say that he felt like he couldn't quite prepare and get his team as physical as they needed to be, because in practice they were going against run and shoot every day. They weren't going against lead blocking, between the tackles, isolation plays. They'd set it up against the taxi squad here and there, but just couldn't. He didn't feel like the offense serviced what he needed on defense a lot. And then when the spread offenses came into college, you would hear things like that. One of the reasons D'Antonio liked to go back to some of the two-back stuff was to get his defense tough and ready to go against some of the tougher teams they would play. They would try to run it at them in the Big Ten. Well, when John L. Smith had the spread offense going, the defense, they did a version of the 4-2-5 with a bandit over in the slot area. And, they would try to inside out a lot of things, and it just down in and down out, you didn't get a lot of consistent physical fitting of gaps against the run. And they just were never consistent on defense. And if you're not going to be consistent on defense, you are not going to be consistent winter, week in and week out. So loose, yeah. Was the culture different? John L. Smith, for some reason, his teams used to always get flagged. Personal fouls, late hits. Not dirty, but just undisciplined in those ways. But I like John L. Smith a lot as a person. Yeah, he was kind of a carnival barker type of personality. And he was very frank and would tell you what's on his mind. He was like Heathcote a little bit, from the same part of the country as Heathcote. Funny guy, high energy guy. I liked him because I thought that he was straight with you, and he gave a lot of respect to Spartan Magazine, SpartanMag.com. I appreciated that, and I hope I run into him again sometime. I liked him. And I said back then, I didn't tell him this, but I used to say if I had a son that was a recruitable football player, back then I would have had no problem sending him to play for John L. Smith. Whether he was at Michigan State or Louisville or whatever college. I thought he was, he won pretty well at Louisville when they were in the whatever conference they were in prior to the Big East. Was it Conference USA? Lost some good assistant coaches along the way, including Bobby Petrino, Nick Holt. Some of those guys were important parts to what he built at Louisville. Came to Michigan State, still had some pretty good assistant coaches, but sometimes when good coaches lose some of their good assistants, it's hard to replace them. It's hard to move forward when they move on. D'Antonio might have experienced that a little bit at Michigan State. Anyway, John L. Smith, good person, liked him, a lot of fun. Loose, yes. Discipline, not always great. Defense did not have the quality control. Offense was exciting at times. Dave Baldwin, I got a big kick out of him. California guy, kind of a Crosby, Stills, and Nash type of guy. Good offensive mind. And during his first offseason at Michigan State, he was very happy to come into the press conference in August of 2004, I think it was, and tell us that he had spent the summer visiting all 5 Great Lakes. He had dipped his toe in all 5 Great Lakes, and he was excited about that. Dave Baldwin, I got to say, late in games, sometimes the play choices, I'm not saying were right or wrong, but I'm not sure that he would think as clearly late in a game as he would earlier in a game as he was getting through his game planning. You would always see a trick play in the second quarter. That became a little bit almost predictable. Dave Baldwin said that he used to drink Diet Pepsi throughout the course of the game. And sometimes you'd look and see that he'd gone through 10, 12, 14 Diet Pepsis in a game. A few Diet Pepsi's probably good. Caffeine, I think, has been shown can help your cognitive ability a little bit to an extent. That many of them, I'm not so sure. Was that part of the problem in the fourth quarter? I don't know. Got great respect for him. Hope he's doing well wherever he is. The places he's gone subsequently, I've always rooted for him. He was at Cincinnati before and after. I think he was offensive coordinator at Cincinnati in 2002 when they almost beat the Buckeyes, the year the Buckeyes won the national championship with Gino Guidugli and those guys. Where was he? He was somewhere. They almost upset Auburn. They should have upset Auburn. And, it was at Auburn, and there were some funny calls down the stretch. He was with, some mid-major. Utah State, maybe. So Utah State, and they had Auburn beat. I was rooting for him. I like Dave Baldwin. I like those guys. Good guys. So, any crazy stories? Not really. Question number 3, Beast Lansing says, which 2 linebackers do you see cementing themselves as starters? Who is the 2 deep behind them? We already went into this a little bit. I think Quavaris Crouch starts at linebacker. I think I think Crouch and Harvey. That's my guess. I think Harvey gained some respect last year. I think the coaches liked him, but the coaches liked some people last year that started, and then some of those same people found themselves outside of the program, like Chris Jackson, Dominique Long. Who are some of the others? Trey Person graduated, but I think Harvey gained some. Just because you start one particular year, it might not carry over. I'm not sure. I'm going to put up one other invitation to people. I'm going to go to our Facebook page and post it. Let people know. So that top 4, like I said before, I think Chase Klein is in there. Maybe a third down pass rush guy. He's added 10 pounds. Maybe that makes him more of a defensive end pass rush type of guy. I'm not sure. Tank Brown, eager to see what he's going to look like, especially once he gets into pads. He didn't play at all last year for the Gophers, so I'm not really sure what to expect of him. You can look to see his high school film, but not sure on Tank Brown. But he's a 4-star talent, so they're not needing him to be the guy. But it's possible Tank Brown could rise up as a positive X factor. Best case scenario, Tank Brown is great, and he and Quavaris Crouch come in, and they're the 2 guys, and they're physical, and they've got that element of quality control, and they beat out Noah Harvey. I like Noah Harvey. I think he can do the job. My point is, if someone beats out Noah Harvey, that means he's pretty solid, better than solid. All right, there's a post. Sorry for the delay. Appreciate everybody being here. We are going to go over to the chat area now. See what kind of questions we got. Of course, at the beginning of this thing, we had a problem with I didn't press a button, didn't have a download complete. Got that squared away. All right. I'm not going to do the starting 5 tonight because I've already wasted a lot of time. All right, here's a question from Dan Wazlowski. Realistic expectations for Keon Coleman. Sorry I took so long, Dan, to get to your question. You gave an early sponsorship. Just getting your question out. I looked for it before, didn't see it. He says, what are realistic expectations for Keon Coleman? I can't help but think of Charles Rogers given his height and speed. He's got speed. I don't know if he's got Charles Rogers speed, but he's got speed. Might be the fastest player on the team. 6'4". He's got some thickness, also leaping ability, ball skills. He has impressed his teammates with his athletic ability, 6'4". A lot of ability coming out of Louisiana. I've said it before, I'll continue to say it. Keon Coleman is going to be a high-maintenance type of guy. High maintenance. Going to need to just stay with him. He's got a lot of ability. Expectations realistically, I think he's got all Big Ten potential at some point in his career. Just got to make sure that he keeps the train on the tracks. Question from Matthew Johnson. What do you make of the nutritional program and some of the weight changes of the players? Notably, Mallory dropping a bunch of weight and guys like Nateote and Cam Allen putting on a lot. Well, Cam Allen came in as a tight end from Texas at about 220. You saw him in the spring scrimmage. He looked like a wide receiver. Moved okay, but at 6'4", he was way too thin for a wide receiver, for a tight end. Way too thin for a tight end. Good on him to graduate early, enroll early, find out what he needed to do at practice. So that was good for him. Put on 20 pounds. What is he, 240 now? Maybe he's halfway there. He's got to put on some more weight. So that's a young tight end who needs to add weight, who has added weight. That's good. Nateote, I don't know what his weight change was. He looks more slim, and he needed to be slim. Like I said, as a junior, I thought that he was just a taste slow. They're at sideline to sideline, a little better as a senior. So I've not verified that he's lost weight, but it looks like he might have, and I think that's what he needed to do. So the nutrition aspect of it right now, they are serious about it, and they've got a plan for everybody, and they stick to it 24 hours a day. Mallory came in at he was up around 330, 340. I remember seeing him at the first week of his August camp when he was a true freshman and looking at him, and he was just uncommonly massive. And I told Konadike, and we did a VCast that day, I'm like, that's the guy that I circled. And I'm not saying it was good or bad. I'm just saying he looks different. And sometimes different turns out to be good. Sometimes different doesn't turn out to be good. But he was just a different-sized human being than everybody else. He moved around okay. I thought that meant that, once he got in shape and fine-tuned some things, that he could be a tank, okay? And he stayed that way for 3 or 4 years, got on the field a little bit, and was never a starter, but, decent contributor. And then this year, new nutritionist, and boom, he's down to, 280? I asked Mel Tucker about that at Big Ten Media Days a couple of weeks ago, and I said, is he really 280? And he just smiled, said, that's the rumor, that's the word. And I wanted to ask him a follow-up, well, is he moving better? What's he look like? But I was interrupted. I didn't get a chance to ask a follow-up question. But that's the way Big Ten Media Days is. You can ask a question, but then there's other. So sometimes the question is about the person you're talking to, the coach or the player, is about finished talking what he's talking about, and you have to anticipate when he is wrapping up his quote and interject a follow-up. And sometimes you misread him and you interrupt him, and he's about ready to say something interesting and you interrupt and you messed it all up. But in order to get the follow-up, you have to do it that way. I didn't do that. I was starting to ask the follow-up, but I got interrupted. And the question that was asked wasn't any damn good, so I wasn't happy about that. Nothing against him. He's trying to do his job too, but I didn't get to ask about Mallory, but we can on Thursday. Anyway, about those guys dropping weight, I think they've got a vision for what each player could look like or should look like at their optimal weight. And some guys, that means gaining weight. Some guys, that means losing weight. With Chase Klein gaining 10 pounds, I'm sure it's a good 10 pounds. I don't think we're going to see anybody coming in out of shape. I think the nutritionist, I think it's good. I think that's extra money that's in the program. That's money that Mark D'Antonio helped raise. And when they brought in Mel Tucker, he had assurances that they would get that type of support from the support staff, including the nutrition program. And you can see some of the before and after pictures with some of the players. You can see some of those guys, even guys that are already good athletes like Jaden Reed, and you see an after picture for him. And you're assuming he's not losing any flexibility or fluidity, but some of those guys were already cut up. Now they're even more cut up. And like Kenneth Walker, the new running back, I mean, that guy got a really interesting look. So what do I make of it? I think that it is an area of improvement for the program. It's state-of-the-art. They've put money into it with the nutritionists, and that's something that they've never quite had before, and I think it's going to help. Jacob Terry says, is Kansas really entering the Big Ten in the coming weeks? I saw your post about that just before we went on the air. By the time people read this or watch this, if it's Wednesday or Thursday when you're watching this, it will have already been, I'm guessing, already been talked about in all the talk shows. There's a guy. Who was the guy? His name was Mason. His last name was Mason. I saw Jacob Terry post a link to it over the Underground Bunker message board just moments before we went on the air. Clicked on him. I think he's like a blogger type of guy. Has some access to the radio in Kansas City area, something like that. they're reporting that Kansas is joining the Big Ten. My initial thought would be disappointment. The Big Ten, do they really feel like they need to answer what the SEC is doing? If they feel like they need to answer it, is Kansas really something you want done, inside of 10 days of this news happening? Are they like A1 on your list? Hey, we got to expand. We have to answer that now. Let's get Kansas. Because if we don't get Kansas, nobody else is going to get Kansas. So I wouldn't know what the rush would be. We've talked about it before. USC, what are they going to do? And I know if you're a big college football fan, you've been listening to the college football shows this week, especially on Sirius Satellite, or for the past 2 weeks, and that is all that anybody is talking about. And I can sit here and talk about it, but I figure you people can get that elsewhere. And one of the things we've done at Spartan Magazine over the years, and we've tried to operate outside of that pack, the pack journalism, pool journalism. Sometimes you have to do that. If you go and cover a basketball game and Michigan State beats Minnesota, everybody writes the same story, whatever. We do some of that too. But I don't want to sit here and bore everybody with an hour of discussion on what I think could or should happen with Big Ten expansion when it's just fairy tale stuff. It's like in the NFL draft when everybody sits around for 3 months and talks about who the Detroit Lions should draft. Sit there for 3 months and talk about it. Who are they going to draft? Who are they going to draft? Big Ten expansion. What's the Big Ten going to do? Going to add Georgia Tech? Try to add North Carolina? Can North Carolina get out of their ACC contract? What about USC? Should the Big Ten and Pac-10 merge, or should they just go get 6 of those teams? You can talk about it, but once you've talked about it for 4 minutes and 31 seconds, that's it, because there's no new information coming in, except for this now with Kansas. My first reaction would be disappointment. Kansas is not good at football. They don't draw fans. They don't move the needle. That doesn't mean they always have to be that bad at football. Mangino had them going pretty good there in football for a while, maybe about 15 years ago. Be hard to do, but what do they bring? If you're trying to keep up with the SEC, and what would that do to the Big 12? It's sad because a lot of these teams are going to be kicked to the curb, and a lot of these what's left of when you get into power conferences. Part of what's going to make a power conference is you're going to play each other more, 9 games or whatever, than 10 games. I don't know. Do you get away from the non-conference games? Do we never see, the SEC teams rarely play Big Ten games, Big Ten teams anyway, in the regular season. I don't know. It's, as you go to the super conference stuff and people are kind of excited about it and some people are not excited about it, I'm more of a preservationist type of guy. I like to preserve what's been great over the years. I'm not big on wrecking good to chase some sort of something that we don't know where it's going and to do it just for the sake of other people's money. I'm not big on that. I think, I'm a big baseball guy, and I think it's ruined Major League Baseball. It's not ruined, but it really severely damaged Major League Baseball, free agency and money and those things. I'm happy for some of the players that have gotten generational wealth. That's great, but it's hurt it. And I'm a big newspaper guy. I love newspapers. Newspapers are not what they used to be because the internet has changed everything. In some ways, the internet's fun, good, and all that, but I miss how great newspapers used to be. And they're still very good. And there's still very good people writing for those newspapers. But back in the heyday, you'd pick up a newspaper, and you go from page to page, and the news would come to you. You don't go and seek your own news. It would come to you as you turn the page. You'd find out things. You know what the standings were in a different way than you do today. Now you have to go find them. You got your feeds or whatever. But, you get like in newspapers, Section A, the news section, you go to page 2, page 3, and you'd say, oh, there was an earthquake in India, and you'd read about that. These days, if there's an earthquake in India, I'm not sure I'd hear about it, sadly. But you turn the page, and the news comes to you. You're not choosing what's on the next page. You're choosing your newspaper, but the news was different. It was a day old, but now, I get on Twitter, and I've got my feeds here and there, but I don't feel as though I'm as informed broadly as I was back then, even though there's more information at your fingertips. Does that make sense? So I think baseball was better in the old days. I think newspapers were better in the old days. I mean, not just newspapers. The news, I don't know. I'm conflicted on what I would prefer. The current access at your fingertips or the old days with the slow pace of the newspapers, and the newspapers were just so great. I fear that college football is going to become in that category, where those of us that are 40 and over, we talk about how great baseball used to be, and some of you that are just get sick of hearing it. I'm worried that 15 years from now, the 40-year-olds will say, man, remember when college football was great, when you had different conferences in different pockets of the country, and they would mix and play each other once in a while. Now we've got like a 48-team super conference or 40 teams. And what that's going to create, a 12-team playoff that everybody's excited about. Okay, that could be interesting, or it could just further boil things down to becoming a regional sport. And we've talked about that here before also. Yeah, it just means more in the South, and the best recruits are in the Southeast. The most fanatical fans are down there. So that's where players are going now when you get name, image, and likeness and sponsorship deals. I told that story a couple of weeks ago about Rex Grossman was in a tunnel when I was at the Michigan State-Florida basketball game, NCAA tournament, 2003 in Tampa. Florida Gators were a number 2 seed. Michigan State went down there and pounded them as an upset. And all the Florida fans, like midway through the game, they all like stood up and they stopped watching the game, and they're looking in the tunnel because Rex Grossman's over there. He's got jeans and a T-shirt on. Oh, there's Rex Grossman. And I'm like, these people are shallow. Sorry. Yeah, it just means more whenever there's a basketball game on. You're at an NCAA tournament basketball game, and you're looking at a 21-year-old football player who still hadn't done much. But my point is, they were so enthralled and enamored with a football player being present. That mindset is what's going to allow players in the Southeast to command nice money in name, image, and likeness. Because if that guy does a commercial for Billy Bob's Tire Company on the corner, they're going to do a lot more commercials because they've got that following more so than college athletes, student athletes have in the Midwest. In Ohio State, it's different. But in East Lansing, they're supported, the college athletes are. But no one's going to be standing and doing that. So there might be a couple players to get a couple quality dairy ads like we talked about, but nothing like it's going to be in the Southeast, which leads to this. When you're a big-time recruit coming out of Belleville, Oak Park, I don't care, Grand Haven, Traverse City, I don't know. Michigan State, has been in the battle to try to get some of those players over the years, battling with Kentucky for whatever reasons in recent years, battle with Michigan. But now, when Auburn or Florida or Georgia or Mississippi State can tell those players, hey, you go to Michigan State, that's great. Your top 5 players get pretty good sponsorship deals. Come down here, we got Billy Bob Tire all over the place. Because of that mindset, people standing to look at a player in the tunnel, there's going to be, I think, more sponsorship opportunities there. You might say, hey, Michigan State's got big-time donors, big-time boosters. They'll be able to pay out a lot of money. Yeah, they will. I'm just not sure how it's going to shake out. I'm just concerned that it will shake out, and there will be the teeter-totter will go in one specific direction. And if that ends up benefiting the Southeastern teams as well, I just wonder, there's an element of college football fans, I think, Northwestern fans, Michigan State fans, Notre Dame fans, even Penn State fans, that and some Michigan fans over the years, and Schembechler was a forerunner of this point of view, that they were student athletes, that these are students. They go to class, they try to make progress toward degrees. Now, there might be less of that than there was in the past, but there's still programs that still operate that way. When the Rose Bowl was decided in 2013 on January 1st, in 2014, when Kyler Ellsworth jumped over the pile and hit the fullback, the line of scrimmage, ended the game, those were 2 student athletes doing that. One was a walk-on. I think that there are some college football fans that put a lot of appreciation toward that flavor of it. The old college try. Remember the old college try? Does that exist anymore? I've got no problem with college athletes getting money because they needed to get money because the money had gotten so out of whack. When coaches started earning 300 times the cost of tuition, that was out of whack. In 1975, I think Woody Hayes made about $40,000 a year. That was maybe 10 times the cost of tuition at Ohio State. That's probably where it should be for a coach, for a mentor in a position of leadership. 10 times the cost of tuition. I think a college athlete would be like, okay, we can play for him. That we're not getting ripped off. Whatever, we'll get a chance to get an education. Saban's making $10 million now. That's about 300 times the cost of tuition at Alabama or more. When that happens, okay, and then in the meantime, we're learning how hazardous this sport is to the health of the young men. So I understand why the money needed to make more sense. I understand that. I'm just worried with the super conferences now getting unplugged from the NCAA. Then at some point, do they just become employees of the university rather than student athletes? Then do they have to go to class? NCAA doesn't have any pull anymore, any power anymore. It used to be a team would get in trouble if it was found that student athletes were not attending class and they were getting grades fixed. And over the years, that's happened at a lot of places, depending on who the coach is, including Michigan State. But some places, it's going to happen more than others. If it gets to the point where players are flat out employees and the NCAA has no power, then increasingly you'll have student athletes that are not going to class, not expected to go to class. Now you get into the unintended consequences of players being recruited and not making progress toward a degree. Then they don't make the NFL, they end up with nothing. Now that happens a lot with recruits, with student athletes anyway. They don't make progress toward a degree, end up with nothing. But it's going to become more sanctioned and more accepted. And I got to tell you, it'll be more accepted in the Southeast. You can argue with me if you want on that, but it just will be. It'll be like, hey, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. That's the way it's been down there for a long time. It just means more, all that, right? So I'm worried that as it heads in that direction and it becomes more regionalized, and rather than 64 power conference teams, there's only 36 in a super conference, and they are employees of a university, and what that's going to do to the mindset of some of those fans. Some of those fans that appreciate the last play of the Rose Bowl in 2014, appreciate Stanford, Northwestern, Vanderbilt, Notre Dame, what it's been sometimes over the years, what Michigan's been sometimes over the years, what Michigan State's been sometimes over the years. If that's not existing anywhere, at some point, do those fans check out? I'm concerned about that. There will be a percentage of fans outside of the Southeast, more so than others, I think, that will not be as enthused about college football as they used to be. In some places, it might be a 40% drop. In some places, it might be a 10% drop. But there will be a drop. There will not be a gain. There will not be a gain. Even if you've got the 40-team super conference and every single game is good versus good, like the NFL, I think the way it used to be, it'll be like Major League Baseball. It's just except in the Southeast, it'll still be a big deal. But the rest of it, football, I've been talking about this in the past, is kind of going downhill on the West Coast anyway, in terms of player participation at the youth levels, in terms of attendance. USC versus UCLA in the Rose Bowl last couple of years, 60,000 people. You guys know all this. So, I don't mean to be a doom and gloomer. Michigan State is still a great place for you guys to come and watch football games, tailgate, see your old friends and all those things. It's still going to be 51 degrees on October 20th, and it's going to smell great, and that'll create a lot of great memories and remind you of what it was like when you were in school, or maybe you're in school right now, and that's still going to be beautiful. Still going to be good people going to Michigan State. And that part's not going to change. 25 years from now, I don't know what it's going to look like. But players will get paid. That's the good part of it. But does that get off kilter? I don't mean about them getting paid too much. I mean about needing to be in class and be a student and make progress toward a degree, that part of it. The NCAA is going to get to the point where they're not going to care if students are in class or not, if student athletes are in class or not. And you could say, well, it's already a joke. It's not a joke everywhere. It's not a joke at every college, okay? It might be a joke at your favorite school. If you're watching this from other colleges, they've been cheating for years. They've been paying players for years. Man, these kids have never gone to class. That might be true at your school, all right? And sometimes that's true at Michigan State. It wasn't that way under D'Antoni. It wasn't that way under John L. Smith. But anyway, I'm concerned about some of those things. I ran into someone else that was concerned about those things. I coached against Al Borges baseball this weekend. I coached against him once last year, too. He's a good guy. 16U travel baseball. Yeah, that Al Borges, the former offensive coordinator at Michigan. Good guy. He's got a good, solid team, good sportsmanship. Talked to him a little bit about it, and he was like, man, yeah. I won't say what he said because, but he's concerned about college football too. And I'm glad that a lot of players are going to get what they deserve, a chunk of it, because it is a big money-making project or a big money-making enterprise. They deserve it, and it's a dangerous sport. I get that. I'm glad for them. I'm conflicted on it, though, because I'm not a big slippery slope guy or whatever, but when that slope goes that way, are we headed toward, another NFL? And my friend Mike Valenti used to say that years ago, that they should get rid of all the other, fringe schools and get 60 power teams and have 30 and just be like the NFL. And I'm like, man, why do you want to be like the NFL? I respectfully disagreed with him. I don't think you want to be like the NFL. I'll say this also. Oklahoma has gone to the college football playoff, I think, 4 out of the last 7 years. Is that what it is? 4 out of the last 7 years. Oklahoma's a great brand going back to the 50s. Bud Wilkinson and all that stuff. Great football power. And they've had some funny days in their past, but they're a flavor and a brand of their own. But I'm glad. I've not always rooted for Oklahoma, but I'm glad that flavor has existed in college football. It's an entertaining little flavor, and I love to watch the Wishbone. I usually rooted against them. I used to root for Osborne in Nebraska back then, but that Wishbone was exciting back then with, Thomas Lott, C.J. Watts, running backs like David Overstreet and Elvis Peacock and Billy Sims. The number 20 Sooners jersey is still one of the great college jerseys ever. The 20 in Oklahoma colors. They've been a power. We know that. Now they're joining the SEC. That's great. They've gone to the playoff 4 of the last 7 years. Maybe with a 12-team playoff, maybe they'll get back in there, I guess. But they've been in the Final Four. We'll put it that way. They've been in the Final Four 4 of the last 7 years, I think it is. I wrote it down somewhere. Been in the Final Four 4 of the last 7 years. Yeah, I'm not sure where I got it. I think it's 4 of the last 7 years. 4 of the last 7 years in the Final Four, Oklahoma. All right, they're going to the SEC. They're going to make more money. Once they're in the SEC and they begin competing in the SEC standings, starting on that day, the next 7 years, how many times do you think they'll be in the Final Four? 4 out of 7? They were in the Final Four on a regular basis in the current system. I'm not saying they're going to go the way of the Huskers, but that type of regularity is going to go out the window. Maybe they'll be better. Maybe they'll start to recruit better defenses. Maybe they'll win a national championship. Maybe they will no longer be Choklahoma, as they've been mainly the last 20 years. A lot of credit. I get a lot of respect for them. They've been in it. I was rooting for them when they played Georgia in the Final Four a couple years ago. But going in there, they're going to be making more money, but I think they will not make the Final Four as regularly as they have the last 7 years. Anyway, I didn't mean to get into all that. I hope you didn't find all that preachy and nonsensical, but I just sense there's a lot of people out there that are like, oh, this is exciting. Now this is what the Big Ten should do. And you get all this going on, and next thing you know, the whole thing is blown up. And some of the sad unintended consequences, I'll use Rice University as an example. When I was growing up, back in my day, when I used to yell at the clouds, back in my day, Rice University was in the Southwest Conference. And Southwest Conference was at that time the worst cheaters in the country. But Rice was a part of it, and it's a great university. I think their band sucks. I think they try to be funny. They try to be like the Stanford band. And I think it's funny that they had a couple string instruments out on the field. That's funny, I guess. But their band can stick it. Their band is not good for college football. They can F off. But Rice University is a great university, I hear. They were in the Southwest Conference. Then when Arkansas left the Southwest Conference and the Big 12 was formed. Remember when the Big 12 was the original super conference? It's a combination of the Big 12 and the Big 8. The Big 8 added 4 teams from the Southwest, and then other teams were kicked out. Arkansas left, and the schools that were not invited include TCU, Rice, and SMU. They were like kicked to the curb, and they became Conference USA mid-majors. They had been major conference teams forever, and then boom, they are a mid-major. I mean, Rice was in the Cotton Bowl in 1956. Remember Tommy Lewis and Dickie Magel for Alabama running on the sideline. Tommy Lewis jumped off the sideline, tackled him, kind of had a brain freeze and jumped off the sideline and tackled the dude. They're in the Cotton Bowl. Rice was pretty good back then. Every team has had their glory years. Rice, it's a Texas school, they had some strong years. But that's where I think was that where Jim Wacker? No, Jim Wacker was at TCU before Minnesota. Anyway, so Rice is out. TCU's out. SMU's out. SMU had been hurt earlier because of the death penalty, of course. But to be kicked out of the Power Five, or what it was called then, the Power Conferences, the BCS, they were major conferences. You know, the major conferences, you had the Big Ten, ACC, Big 8, Southwest, Pac-12, then you had your major independents out east, Notre Dame plus the Eastern schools, Pitt, Penn State, Boston College, and Syracuse. And I'm talking about 1970s, 80s. Big 12 was formed, and SMU's out, TCU's out, Rice is out. They are no longer power conference teams. Now, TCU won the Mountain West or whatever, Conference USA, whatever conference they were in, became really strong, went to the Rose Bowl, beat Wisconsin. We talked about that. They were good enough that when Nebraska left the Big 12 and Missouri left the Big 12, and the Big 12 needed new schools, they added TCU. So TCU kind of worked their way back up, kind of like Premier League soccer. They were relegated out, and they worked their way back in. That's happened before. SMU has been good lately. They're knocking on the door again. But we've seen Rice, SMU, and TCU be ostracized from the power conferences. That can happen again. And it's going to happen again. It's going to happen in Wake Forest, potentially. You know, it's all well and good. You know, what are we going to do? This is fun, you know. Major conference. Well, they're one super conference. I think it's kind of scary. It's kind of sad because I kind of like football where a Boise State can jump up and beat Oklahoma in a bowl game, and that can maybe still happen. But this is what we're going to lose, okay? All the emphasis is going to be to make the 12-team playoff. We made the playoff. That's not going to be good enough. Your last game is what people are going to remember. You tell me, what was more fun? 1999 when Michigan State made the Citrus Bowl and beat Steve Spurrier and beat the Florida Gators down there in Florida on January 1st, finished number 10 in the country. Remember that? Paul Ettinger, field goal, wins the game, big celebration after Saban had gone to LSU. What was better, that, winning a bowl game, a meaningless bowl game, Citrus Bowl, was that better, or losing to Alabama 38-0 in the college football playoff? That wasn't so good, was it? That kind of ended the season like, man, good season, but man, what a down. We're no good. It was better to win a bowl game. People can talk about bowl games being meaningless, and they've become meaningless, but over the years, beating USC in the John Hancock Bowl back in 1990, beating Baylor in the Cotton Bowl December 31st, 2014. And I'm not even including the Rose Bowl wins, but you're in general, some of those bowl victories, that's going to be non-existent. I know that only 12 teams are going to make the playoff, but 11 of those teams are going to end their season on a loss and not feel good about it. And now the bowl games that are left over, you know, those are 11 games. So like whatever, I don't know if they're going to incorporate bowls into those or not, but like whatever the 12th best bowl game is or 13th best bowl game, well, I mean, those will be some pretty good teams. I hope we don't get to the point where if you're number 13 in the country playing against number 16 in the country in the Alamo Bowl, that winning that game doesn't elicit the type of satisfaction that beating USC in the John Hancock Bowl in 1990 did. And Perlis used to talk about back in the 90s. He was never for the playoff. He said, I'm in favor of everybody getting, you know, what we got right now in the bowl games, brother, is you got 32 different bowl games. You got 32 different coaches that get to end the season with a win. 32 different teams get a T-shirt saying we're the champs. 32 different teams get a trophy. You go back home and talk to the alumni about it. What's wrong with that? That's my bad George Perlis impression. But I think he was right. Now I'm a preservationist. I'm an old Kaji yelling at the clouds type of guy. But I was that way about baseball too, and that sport has been compromised. MLB has been. Still a great sport, but it's like when the Cubs sold off all their players, and Dan Dockich is like, how is this good for baseball? It's not. You know, my son is 16. He's a baseball fan, but he just assumes if the Tigers get a good player, then in a matter of 2 or 3 years, they're going to trade him because they're not going to be able to hold on to him in free agency. How's that good for being a fan? I think college baseball is the best form of baseball currently. The college NCAA baseball is the best current form of baseball. I'm not saying they're the best players. I'm saying team game and all for the team and all that stuff. It's the best. All right, let's go over here to the comments and reactions. I'm going to store some of these other questions, and maybe I'll come on the air and do I've got some plans for maybe an afternoon thing here and there. Let's get over here to the questions. I'm going to put on my readers. Don't want to strain anything. All right, let's get to where the horn worked, I guess. Uploaded. Okay, let me see here. Hayden Roberts, good to see him. Got the sound working. Old Tug, the bell cow. Got it. All right. Rob South, Ken Snyder, Mike Bell, Angelo Gross Enthusiast. It's official. Keontae Goodwin season. Yes, it is. Going after Keontae Goodwin. Jacob Terry, if we get Goodwin, Cap will have a field day. Cap is Chris Kapilovic, Michigan State offensive line coach. They're continuing to recruit Keontae Goodwin. Committed to Kentucky. He's a national top 50 type of offensive lineman, 6'8", 300. Big timer. Michigan State's never stopped recruiting him. They need to have a good season this year. Maybe they can get a foot in the door there. Hayden Roberts is drinking a fancy water, also known as White Claw Surge. White Claw, good for you. I could tell a White Claw story, but I'll save that for another day. Are nutritionists common in college football? Great question. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how many programs have, paid full-time nutritionists. Every program has a nutrition program of some sort, training table of some sort. Whether it's to this scientific detail, I don't know how many do. That's a great question. Angelo Gross Enthusiast says, Keontae Goodwin should be a 5-star in my opinion. He has world-class size and great work ethic. Well, he's number 60 in the country, I think. And traditionally, Rivals.com only hands out 5-star status to about 25 to 30 players. So you got to be in the top 30 to be a 5-star. Jason G says, saw that hit that Halliday had on Kenneth Walker. Just got me thinking, can Walker's body hold up for a 12-game season and 9 in the Big Ten? Yeah, Walker is extremely well put together. Extremely well put together. Kenneth Walker, you can never make total, there he is. You can never make total, where'd I go? There's Kenneth Walker. You can never make, complete predictions of health. I mean, some players might have a history of health problems, but to stand here and for me to tell you, no, he's going to be fine, he'll be healthy. You can never predict health, right? But the way he's put together, he's got as good a chance as anybody to stand up to the Big Ten rigors. I see no reason why he wouldn't. He rushed for about 600 last year in the ACC in a short season and 600 the year before. Now he's bigger and stronger. I think he'll be fine. Mr. Bowman says, hello. How long's count been on? Started at about 9 o'clock tonight. So it's been about an hour and 53 so far. At that point, it's 25 minutes. Thank you, Jacob. The Untitled Beer Ranking Show says, like the video, guys. Mr. Bowman says, thanks, Jacob. Gordon Janona says, Tony Dorsett and the tearaway jerseys. Yeah, in the 70s, that was good, right? Except when Tony Dorsett was a senior in college, it was Tony Dorsett. Tony Dorsett. Then I think the week of the Heisman, he said he was now Tony Dorsett. Cool. Man, he was great. You get a chance to go and watch the Pittsburgh game against Georgia in the 1976 Sugar Bowl, January 1st, 1977. Georgia hit there with them for a while, but Pittsburgh pulled away, won the game, national championship, something like 27-7. But Dorsett was fast, and the linemen were fast back then too. Saul Sunseri was on the field that day with the big shoulder pads. But Dorsett could fly. And he would be fast by today's standards. Back then, he was really fast. He was outstanding. One of the best college running backs ever. Cameron Trigg says, chances with Ryan Baer. Ryan Baer, that ship has sailed. He has eliminated Michigan State. So, yep, all the kids were calling. It was kids calling in today. That's good. That reminds me of me. Back when I was 13, I was all about college football, especially this time of year. I'd have my nose in one of these things all the time. Boom. I'd have them all out, putting together my predictions. to sickness. It's good. I try to remind myself of that these days, when it's time to cover, to write, to cover practice or games or, try to revisit the way I felt when I was 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, how much I loved college football. Just to have that enthusiasm can carry you through a little bit. That doesn't mean I'm waving pom-poms and like, that type of thing. But walking to the stadium, the tailgate, the bands, all that stuff, that doesn't get old. I can't say I'm as enamored with it as I was back then, which is maybe kind of sad. That's why I gravitate towards some of the teams, some of the sports that I don't cover professionally. I don't cover the NHL. So going to an NHL game is fun for me. Taking my kids and doing that, that's cool. Going to MLB games is cool. I like that. But, when I was 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, college football was my favorite. And it was intense. Lose a game, and it was disastrous. That's what's good about it. Mr. Bowman says, Gordon, that is so true. What a nice kid. Go green, Andrew. Mr. Bowman says, I love this kid. Please call back during the season, Andrew. Andrew's got some fans. Steve Smith 313 says, Andrew, go green. Brad Forshenko says, caller of the year, Andrew. Go, Andrew. Rob South, leave us hanging. Jim, laughing out loud. Always great content. Thanks, Jim. Oh, hanging about the Tucker thing. I won't forget that one. If you remind me in a couple of years, I'll let you know whether we can talk about it again or not. George Page says, I checked in a little late, but wanted to ask if you've ever seen a band called Surrender Dorothy back in the early 90s. I was in the band. Do you think we have the best receivers in the Big Ten? George Page was in Surrender Dorothy. Let me tell you something, man. I mentioned Surrender Dorothy. You picked up my brainwaves. That's the way the world works. There's something about planet Earth where people pick up brainwaves. Because I got a question today, and it wasn't from you, George. It was from Sparty from Pawleys Island, South Carolina. Unless, George, you are Sparty from Pawleys Island, South Carolina. Question number 6 tonight, which I didn't get to, from Pawleys Island, South Carolina. Says, hey, Jim, a little off topic. And I did read this question earlier, and I prepared my answer. And it includes Surrender Dorothy. Says, hey, Jim, a little off topic, I'm sure, but I was reminiscing about some of the bands I saw on or around campus back in the 1980s, such as Ted Nugent, the Romantics, Huey Lewis and the News, the Bus Boys, and the B-52s. I don't know who the Bus Boys are. Is that a punk band? Anyway, just wondering, if you could go back in time and invite any 5 bands to come and play downstairs at Dooley's, also known as Sensations, who would you invite? In other words, who would be the Comparoni Power Index of the 1980s bands? Okay, I got to say U2 first of all, because U2 did play downstairs at Dooley's before it was called Sensations in 1980. Everybody knows that. If that counts, I would like to be there, right, and revisit that one. But my personal power rankings, it'd be the Toll, number 1 out of Columbus, Ohio. They were ahead of their time. They were kind of polished grunge before grunge happened. And they had a little bit of Clash, a little bit of Simple Minds, a little bit of Jim Morrison. Those of you that remember the mid to late 80s in East Lansing, remember the Toll. They were great. Number 2, Bob Harvey, who I did see downstairs at Dooley. I saw the Toll over at this place right here, Rick's. But Bob Harvey, saw them at Rick's many times and saw them downstairs at Dooley's a couple times. Bob Harvey. Also saw them on the Conan O'Brien show about 10 years ago. Didn't know they were still doing their thing. I don't think they are, but they got together to do that. Anyway, number 3, Red Hot Chili Peppers. I never saw them in East Lansing, although I do remember seeing them on the calendar. Remember the old Rick's calendar? They'd post those up around campus to let people know who was playing at Rick's throughout the month. The new one would go up, like right now it's August 1st, right? So the August one would have been up for a couple weeks, and you'd say, oh man, August 18th, Red Hot Chili Peppers are playing. That's before anyone knew who the Red Hot Chili Peppers were. They'd been in California, they'd gotten some notoriety there. Then a couple people in the band had some substance problems, so one of the guys in the band was from the Grand Rapids area, so to kind of cool out, they came back to Michigan, and he was closer to home, and they kind of established themselves in Michigan there for a few years. But at that time, that's right around when the Toll and Bob Harvey were playing. I'm here to tell you that the Toll was a bigger deal than the Red Hot Chili Peppers at that time, locally. Number 4, I got to put REM. I think REM played in East Lansing a few times back then. That's what I hear. I'd like to see what that was all about. Number 5, I got to go with Big Daddy Kinsey and the Kinsey Report. Got to put blues on there a little bit. There was Rick's American Cafe was on the blues circuit in the 80s, early 90s. You know, you'd see Eddie Clearwater, Coco Taylor, I think, and Big Daddy Kinsey. So, as a nod, and those were some of the great nights ever there, right? So I got to put them in there. Honorable mention, I heard that REO Speedwagon used to play in the Big Ten circuit. I'd like to go see that and see what Rich Rath was up to at that point. That was an honorable mention. And I wrote this a couple hours ago. Honorable mention also to Surrender Dorothy. I'm not kidding, George Page. I had that on my prepared statement as an honorable mention, Surrender Dorothy. Before the band just became Dorothy, I'm going to show you what I'm not just making this up. It was Surrender Dorothy when you had the two female lead singers, right? You had the blonde and you had the brunette, right? Then the blonde left and it was just the brunette and it was just Dorothy. So I'm giving you the rundown. So I saw you guys a lot and I thought you were great. I'm not going to kid you. We were there one night and my friend was there and his sister was there and I was talking to his sister and stuff. Had a good time and the band was good and it was Surrender Dorothy. And she was going to Ferris. Talked to her, had a good time. Then the next month, okay, when is Dorothy playing again? We got to get your sister back down here. You know, Dorothy's playing. Surrender Dorothy's playing again. It was a good time. Went and saw them again. Talked to her and hanging out back there by the pool tables. And, you know, the band playing, you know, gravitate towards the stage a little bit, putting on a good show and stuff. Well, I ended up marrying that girl. And Surrender Dorothy might have had something to do with it. Because we had some good times. And that was kind of at the beginning of all that. And maybe it wouldn't spark the same if it hadn't been for that band. Band was good. It was fun. You had your two female lead singers. The supporting band played covers on the mark. Very good with that. You guys played 99 Red Balloons, right? You guys played, I don't know. If I thought of it longer, I could think of it. But Dorothy, she was good when she was by herself also. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, that band, I'm talking, that's like, what, 1997? 96? Anyway, good for you, George, member of Surrender Dorothy. Glad to have you here. And yes, you guys were great. That is one of my favorite bands, local bands. Not that I continue to see bands around here because look how old I am, but also because there's no places that play it. There's no venues that have bands. We've talked about that before. He says, let me read what you posted. I checked in a little late, but wanted to ask you if you've ever seen a band called Surrender Dorothy back in the early 90s. You're saying early 90s. Early 90s, Surrender Dorothy. I did 95, 97. That went into about 97. Man, do you think we have the best receivers in the Big Ten? No, the best receiver in the Big Ten are Ohio State with Olave and the other dude. Wilson, is that his name? But Michigan State's receivers are good. They're good. I'd have to compare it to everybody else in the Big Ten to tell you exactly where I think they rank. But Jaden Reed's going to play. He's going to take it up a notch. Naylor, if he stays healthy, is going to be a plus. Got Ricky White coming back, and that's going to be exciting to see what he can rekindle. And there's some other ones behind them. But anyway, great to have you here, George. And I can tell everybody out there that Surrender Dorothy was the real deal. They were exciting. They were good. They were fun. And the ladies liked them. Come on, what else did they play? I don't know. Sparty 2150 says, we do not have better receivers than Ohio State, unfortunately. Better question, would we have the second best? I'm going to look into that to see who else is out there. And I don't know. That's a question. I'm punking out on this, but usually that's a question I can answer better during the season, obviously. But I'm not big on judging things based on what I read or stats. I want to judge things based on what I see, and I've not seen any games lately because there haven't been any games. Spartan MD says, please tell me that Big Ten is not adding Kansas. I'd like to tell you that. Andrew Erdman says, would much rather add West Virginia. I don't necessarily agree with that, but George Page says, rumors. George Page is a great name, by the way. George Page is a good name for a sports writer. It's also a good name for a guitarist. It's like Jimmy Page, but it's not. It's George Page. That's a good name. George Page says, would rather have Duke, Virginia, Notre Dame. I agree with George Page. I don't know about Duke, but Spartan MD says, feel for Izzo having to recruit against Kansas. Yeah, sometimes Michigan State just decides not to recruit against Kansas. Like, oh, you're considering Kansas? Okay, we're out. I shouldn't have said that. Andrew Erdman says West Virginia, Notre Dame would be solid. West Virginia, I mean, they've done some winning, but I don't know. What do they do in terms of TV ratings, which maybe is not as big as it used to be? I don't know. Angelo Gross enthusiast. Although West Virginia is consistently a well-supported program, consistently solid teams, every once in a while very good teams. The thing is, I mean, that can be like Oklahoma. I mean, West Virginia, when they were an Eastern Independent with Major Harris and Hostetler, especially with Major Harris, they played for a national championship. And then they got into the Big East, and they were making a run at the national championship with Ridge Rodriguez and those guys before Pat White was injured. Say what you want about West Virginia, they flirted with a couple national championships. And what would that have been? 1984 and like 2003 or something. Then they joined the Big 12, a better conference, and they've never sniffed a national championship, right? Sometimes you're better off being a big fish in a small pond, Oklahoma. Sometimes you're better off being a big fish in the Big 8 than being one of many big fish in a big ocean like the SEC. That's my warning signal to the Sooner Nation that 4 times in the Final Four in the last 4 years, don't expect that to continue. Angelo Gross, Harold Joyner enthusiast, says, I hope Michael Williams has a great senior season. I think that he will, and I hope that we can add him in this cycle. By the way, this is Andrew. Okay, so Andrew is Angelo Gross, Harold Joyner enthusiast. Now we know the rest of the story. It's kind of like an episode of Scooby-Doo where he rips off the mask, and Angelo Gross, Harold Joyner enthusiast is our buddy 13-year-old Andrew from Perrysburg, Ohio. Well, good for you. Michael Williams, 4-star linebacker, got some thickness, missed most of last year, got on the field during the January playoffs as a tight end, scored a touchdown in one of those playoff games. Can't remember which one it was. I was looking forward to seeing him at the camps this summer. Didn't happen. Still nursing along that injury, so a lot of schools want to see what he looks like this fall. And if he puts out some good film, that's what's going to be interesting. If he all of a sudden, boom, puts out like 3 or 4 good games of film in September, then teams might start flocking to him again. And Michigan State's in good position if that happens. He's a 4-star guy, by the way, and that can help the recruiting rankings a lot. I'm not here to tell you that he's great. I don't know. Spartan MD says, wish they could grab more teams east of the Mississippi River. Spartan MD says, at Andrew, West Virginia Notre Dame would be great geographically, but does West Virginia fit with the shared research funds? Maybe not. I don't know if they're an AAU university. Andrew Erdman says at Spartan MD, they fit geographically, but I don't buy into the academic side of this. This is all being driven by football and money. Teams should be added based on if they make the conference better. You definitely have a real-world approach to this, Andrew Erdman. I think that you might have changed your name now to your actual name. Anyway, you're right. It is about football and money, but the Big Ten is going to try to stick to their academics, AAU inclusion. So you can say it's all about money, and to some extent you're right, but I'm not sure I think the Big Ten is going to cling to the academic part of it. Spartan MD says, perhaps I'm understanding it correctly, but the research money was exponentially larger. Hopefully someone can clarify. 280 is too light to be a defensive tackle, in my opinion. Doors Fan 91 says, talking about Mallory. That is interesting. So now is he a quick 3-technique type of guy? I mean, I always thought about him being like, a massive 1-technique middle guard, anchor the defensive line type of guy. I thought that 330, maybe he was too big. I thought maybe he could have played comfortably at 315. And boom, he's 280. So I don't know what that's going to look like. Trevor Emmerich says, why would Mark have raised that money? Wasn't like he would have done anything worthwhile with it. Why would Mark have raised that money? He was raising that money to pay his assistant coaches more. Jason Killip saying, come on. Or he's saying, comp. Angelo Gross enthusiast. In 10 years, it will be the SEC Super Conference and the Big 20. Might be right. Might be right. An AFC and an NFC. And what if the Big Ten, what if the See, that's where it could get dangerous because the SEC, if they become employees, do they just start paying players? Come to Mississippi State and you're guaranteed $30,000 a year to play, plus college if you want it, and whatever you can get NIL on the side, and there'll be a lot down here. And since you're an employee, you're not really a student athlete, you don't have to go to class. If they're doing that, and the Big Ten with its partners and what's left of the Big 12, maybe some Eastern schools and some Pac-12 schools, if they're more likely to cling to the academic side of it. So are you going to end up with competing against a Southern Conference of true professionals, kids that do not intend to go to class, go down there, that don't want to go to class, that don't have any entrance requirements, don't have any academic eligibility requirements, and are just flat football players? And then the North is trying to be more like, can you compete against that? Do you want to compete against that? I don't know. But you're probably going to have to, if you can't beat them, you're going to have to join them. So suddenly you're going to have to lower your standards. I don't know. I don't think it's headed toward a good place. Just don't. Nick Harrington says, Comp, how we doing? Did I miss the call in? What day does fall camp start? Thursday. What need the most work going in? What needs the most work going in? Offensive line, defensive backfield. That's the answer. Angelo Gross Enthusiast says, in 50 years, the SEC will implode. Wow. Andrew Damas. Matthew Johnson, kind of hope you're right. 50 years, why would they implode, though? I just think it just kind of becomes I don't know. If it keeps going in that direction, it just becomes another NFL. And there'll be more parity, and they'll have more teams in the tournament, and they will win their share of tournaments. They'll continue to win. They'll have 4 or 5 in it. They'll be very proud of that. I just wonder if everyone else is going to want to play ball like that. And that's where, I don't know. Years ago, in the Rose Bowl used to have teams from all over the country in it. Tennessee played in it. Alabama played in it. I'm talking like in the 20s and 30s. But the reason that the Rose Bowl pared it down and said, no, we only want Pac-8 team and a Big Ten team. It'll be Midwest against Pac-12 every year. The reason they did that is because the Southern teams were cheating too much back then in the 20s and 30s with ringers. Yeah, they had ringers back then. They were like, we don't want you guys. Secondly, the Tournament of Roses people weren't real cool on the segregation thing in the South either. That was a reason. But 100 years later, is there going to be another divide where the Big Ten and the Pac-12 are like, well, you guys just play your own thing? Somebody called up one of the Sirius satellite shows today and said he was a Big Ten, Pac-10 fan, and he said, yeah, the SEC should just do their thing, let them do what they want, and then the rest of the conferences should just not be a part of their playoff and continue to do college football the way we want to do college football. Let them have their 16 teams, and if they want to add some from the ACC, whatever, they will have good audiences, but they still won't have New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. I don't know. I'm not sure how many people are watching college football in Los Angeles and in New York anyway, but his point was let them have their own thing. And on one hand, I'm like, yeah, you let them have their own thing, and the rest can try to play real college football, meaning student athletes and everything. And you can have student athletes and still pay them name, image, and likeness. I'm just worried, like I said, I'm worried about no entrance requirements, no academic progress requirements. So that's kind of the hockey model. Because in hockey, it's not as big of a sport, obviously, but you've got college hockey in the United States. And, and even within the United States, you've got some conferences like the Ivy League that don't have academic scholarships, or some schools in the ECAC, but then some schools in the Big Ten have a different number of scholarships. And they play on different rules by themselves, and they can still compete. And then the same age group, you've got the OHL up in Canada, which those guys turn pro when they're 16. They forego their academic, their athletic, they forego their amateurism, which is another thing I've not thought about. But at age 16, your top prospects in Toronto, British Columbia, throughout Canada, they make a decision when they're 16. And am I going to preserve my amateur athletic eligibility and geared toward American colleges, or am I just going to join the major juniors and just go pro at 16 and get a little bit of money, play for the Windsor Spitfires, Peterborough Petes, those type of teams in the OHL and the Quebec Major League and the Western Major League, Sarnia Sting, those teams. And even there's OHL teams in Michigan like Saginaw Spirits and Flint, whatever Flint's called these days. They play there at the IMA Arena. Anyway, you've got pro kids that are 16 through 20 in the OHL, and you've got college kids that are 16 to 23 or 18 to 23 in the NCAA, and they both get drafted. The NHL drafts out of both pools, and those two are in competition with one another as to what's the best path in the NHL, going through college or going through OHL. I think most people agree OHL, but there's plenty in college. Plus, you get a degree, you make progress toward a degree. So OHL said, well, we'll give you money. You can go to college while you're in OHL. But it's two different ones. And if you win the NCAA College Hockey National Championship, you still celebrate and you're still a champion and you feel great about it. And you win the OHL, what's that called? The Memorial Cup. You win that thing, and they throw a parade for you. It's a big deal. OHL is like the college football of Canada. But there's two completely different things, two different champions. They both send players to NHL. What if college football became that way, where the SEC became like the OHL, where they're just pros, and the rest of the country is like college hockey? On one hand, I'd be like, I'd kind of like that, like you guys go do your thing. On the other hand, I'd be very, very sad if we never saw Notre Dame play Alabama again, or, Michigan State play Georgia. I don't want to take that away. Then you're cutting off your nose to spite your face, and that needs to be saved. I'm not sure that the SEC wants to save it that way. I think they want to just take over and just make it professional because it just means more down there, and go toward that slope of no academic requirements, no entry requirements, don't have to go to class. We're paying everybody. We're going to outpay everybody. We're going to get all the best players. We already have the best players. Now we're going to really just go out and get the best players because we're going to be able to offer the most money because it means more down here. We're going to have more sponsorships, and we're going to be crazy enough to pay you more. Does it become an arms race? Who puts a limit on how much you're allowed to pay players? I don't know, but I don't know. It's good for the players to make some of that money because it's crazy money, but we'll see. There's worse problems in the world. We're just talking college football here. It really doesn't matter. It matters to the young men. I wish them the best. It's my job. I guess it matters to me, but I don't count. But there's more important issues. We're just here arguing about something that really doesn't matter all that much. It matters to some families, the families that are taking part. And you guys, from an entertainment standpoint, matters to you because it's part of, like I was talking about when you're 12 or 13, you love college football, or Andrew down in Toledo. I get that part of it. But it's not like it matters. It's sports, right? All right, it's getting late. Let's go through these real quick. Blong John says, Surrender Dorothy. Wow, that takes me back. Blong John. Yeah. Surrender Dorothy. They were good. Getting a shout out from Blong John. Doors fan 91 says, between the money and COVID, college football might be on the downslide. Yeah, I agree. I was just talking about that, as you may have heard. Nick Harrington says, any little sniff of why White went off the radar for a while? Yeah, there's talk, but he's back, so it might not matter now. Huge Power Marshadow says, I don't have a question, but have been going to the barrio with my brother, per your suggestion. I absolutely love it. Got a margarita last time, but I'm drinking water tonight. Good for you. But just because it's a Tuesday night, you don't have to be shy, and it's getting late. Sparty2150 says, I asked this on the bunker, but I'll ask again. Who of the transfers starts game one? Who of the transfers? If you had to pick one or more. Jarrett Horst is going to start it off at the tackle. Crouch at linebacker. At least one transfer at corner. I guess I'll go with Ronald Williams. Could be Kimbrough. I don't know. Those three. Russo at quarterback. Kenneth Walker at tailback. Could be 5. Those would be the 5 most likely. Hunter Page 23 says, really think picking up Notre Dame would be best move to combat the SEC merger. How realistic do you think the possibility is of Notre Dame potentially joining the Big Ten? Well, there's talk about Clemson and Florida State showing interest in the SEC. There's rumors out there, but those two universities say it's not true. So if it is true, if Clemson and Florida State are petitioning the SEC, then they think they can get out of their ACC contract. If they think they can get out of their ACC contract, then maybe Notre Dame can get out of theirs if they want to. Notre Dame wants to stay independent, though. And with a 12-team playoff, that's all the more reason for them to remain independent. Although, remaining independent, they used to make more money than anybody else. Now, they're not going to be making as much money as the SEC schools, and probably not as much as the Big Ten schools. So Notre Dame is trying to become a national power. They're a national power, but they're trying to win it, right? And they've lost coaches. They lost a defensive coordinator to A&M a couple of years ago. That shouldn't happen in Notre Dame. Notre Dame should be able to, whether they want to or not, they should. Notre Dame would like, I would imagine, to be able to pay their coaches more than anyone in the country if they need to. Not that they've ever been that style, but they should they would probably think they should be able to have the opportunity to outpay everybody, like the New York Yankees, even if they don't. It's kind of where they would like to be. Well, increasingly, they might like to be there, but they're not going to be there. It's at the point now where Notre Dame is going to bring in less money than Northwestern. And SEC is getting rolling. They'll be bringing in more or less money than Vanderbilt and Mississippi State. So if you're Notre Dame, that was one of the things that made Texas say, okay, we got to get on that bus because we're Texas. And A&M is making more money than we are. Look at their schedule. Look at A&M's home schedule. They're going to have Alabama and LSU coming every other year, and once in a while Georgia and Florida coming to their place. Look who's coming to our place. Texas Tech, Iowa State. Iowa State's good, but doesn't really, if you're Longhorn Bob with a hat, A&M, we want to be. Don't tell anybody, but we want to be like them. All right, so A&M goes, so Texas goes to SEC. At what point does Notre Dame say, look, this is crazy. Mississippi State's making more money than we are. They're making, $10 million more than we are every year. Over the course of 20 years, that's a nice chunk of change. At some point, does Notre Dame say, okay, if we get into a conference, at what point is it no longer wise to remain out of the two super conferences? I don't know. So if Florida State and Clemson jostle free, then Notre Dame might become open. And we talked about I don't know. Notre Dame probably wouldn't want to do it. But if you're the Big Ten Super Conference, Big Ten, add USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, Notre Dame, and maybe one other dancing partner. If you get North Carolina, Boston College doesn't move the needle much, but it's a Notre Dame partner. I don't know. This is like playing Risk. Remember in Risk when you're trying to take over let's take over Asia, take over Europe, whatever. That's what this is. You're trying to take over different parts. And, we all like to sit around like amateur, sports big businessmen and say what this conference should do and what that conference should do. But in the end, once it's all settled, it's just not – it's not going to be as good as it once was. Back in the past, we used to argue about who the national champion was. Sometimes there'd be two different national champions, and that wasn't good either. But this is – I don't know. But Notre Dame, I'm not sure what they're thinking, but if there are two super conferences and they are not in either one of them, then I don't know, maybe they could revisit things. And I don't know if I want that either. I don't know what I want, except I need something to eat now. But I appreciate everybody being here. Got some other questions I didn't get to. Great to have George Page on here talking about Surrender Dorothy. That was good. Not that he was a guest or anything, but it's interesting that he would bring that up because I'm telling you, I had that in my liner notes coming into the show. I had Surrender Dorothy in there as an honorable mention in my top 5. Anyway, George Page might have brought that up because maybe he saw that question over at the bunker where we listed the questions for the night, that it was on there. Maybe he was kind of, I don't know. But the world knows. The world knows that when something's going on here, there's brainwaves over there, and they connect telepathically. Is that the word? Anyway, give us a thumbs up. I didn't say that. Subscribe to the channel if you don't already. Go over to SpartanMag.com, become a Spartan Magger. We'd like to have you over there. We'll be back soon. We got practice coming up on Thursday. We went almost 2.5 hours with this nonsense tonight. Got a little long-winded like I normally do. I apologize about that, but I can't help it. Maybe we'll have an afternoon version of this, a shorter version coming up. I got some ideas about that because I routinely don't get to all the questions because I start talking too much. 2 hours goes by and it gets late. People have been drinking margaritas. They need to go to bed and go to work. So if it takes me this long to get through 7 questions, maybe I shorten it down to maybe 3 questions. And I do a 3 and out in the afternoon. Keep an eye out for something like that. Anyway, give us a thumbs up. We appreciate everybody playing along tonight and appreciate the phone calls. And we'll see you next time. You've been watching Spartan Mag Live. Go over to SpartanMag.com. Good night, everybody.